Everybody. I'm not succeeding at starting exactly at 7, but it's better than I thought it was going to be. Tonight, actually, I was on track to starting on time, and then the train stopped. So, what are you going to do, right? Sorry, one other thing I need to update. Okay, we are ready to jump back into Book of Hours. So, looks like we may have. Oh no, sorry, that was July's patch. I think there's a patch in the beta branch right now, which is helping taking some of the load off the CPU. So there's for those of you that find this technical stuff interesting, and I kind of do. So a really good example of some of the weird stuff that just catches me by surprise every once in a while. Industries of Titan. So I have. Sorry, I just opened Cultist Simulator instead of Book of Hours. I think it's going to be one of those days. Where are you, Book of Hours? Um, yeah, okay. This explains why the beta branch stuff wasn't happening. But yeah, there was an interesting post that sort of. So some of you may remember when I did Industries of Titan. And for reasons that are completely uninteresting to get into right now, I have way more RAM than like you should on a gaming computer. Not you should, but like than what you need on a gaming computer. Um, I think we're kind of past the point where, like, so there are a couple things that were true about games. Like, for a while, games wouldn't really take advantage of all of the cores available. And then, excuse me, for a while, I think it would be the most memory that would be used would be 16 gigabytes. And I think probably one of the Respawn Star Wars games sort of moved that up. It was something like 32 gigs or something like that. But really, anything, I'd go so far as to say anything beyond 16. But let's say anything beyond 32, that is really not translating into any meaningful change that you couldn't achieve through other means, right? Obviously, if you have like 6 trillion tabs open like I do, or other things, or you're running like a lot of VMs or something like that, you can do some justifications. But for the most part, you're good. And there are other, like, computers, believe it or not, are used for things that aren't games. But one of the really weird side effects of this was that when I was doing Industries of Titan, I think it was some kind of memory leak. But anyways, there was a bug. It was sort of known by the team. They were working on it. But essentially there was, once you started playing past a certain point, you would be signing yourself up for a bad time. Like, the game would sort of start to chug and just, all sorts of awful stuff would happen. But what was weird was that for me, I kept reading about this and I really wanted to try and help and offer reports and things like that. But it really wouldn't be until I hit something like a 6-hour mark or something like that. And as it turns out, it really was that it was just taking up the RAM. And I don't know for sure, but like basically I just seemed to have a very distorted view of where the problems came up just by virtue of the fact that there was so much space to sort of fill up. So it always, but the thing is that, like, then there's VRAM, right? So there can be other cases where, you have some problem related to running out of memory. And I'm like, well, clearly that can't be it, because it's, again, there are some cases where that 100% legitimately happens. There's a reason why I bought the amount that I did. Number one, it was cheap, but but yeah, in this case here, it just adds another dimension of the complexity. But the thing is that because there are just so many different little components, all of which can be the source of trouble, it can sometimes be interesting to hear how some of the stuff gets fixed, right? So there's that story about Crusader Kings 2, where there was a massive performance improvement for games that had a large Byzantine Empire, once they realized that so many cycles were being dedicated to rulers finding out whether or not they could castrate subjects. So, the sort of thing that everyone dreams of putting in patch notes. So in the case of Book of Hours, and they more or less say this directly, right? Like, so I think there are probably more than a few cranky messages saying, why at the end of the game does everything run so slow? I get to play Cyberpunk at 4K with max settings and RTX on, or ray tracing on. Your game should run fine. Well, as it turns out, a lot of that work was being sent to the CPU. So, the GPU's just sitting there, not doing anything. Actually, an inverted version of this that I hear from people is Phantom Brigade. They talk about, it's like, my computer runs way too hot with this game. It shouldn't do that. And I'm like, well, I don't think you know how much is being simulated in the background. It's actually probably using those resources a lot more than you think. But yeah, in the case of Book of Hours, it seems like on the beta branch they have something that is basically being a little bit more efficient. I don't know if they're farming more work off to the GPU or not, but I think there is a little more efficiency in terms of what is being drawn at any given point, which is something that you can kind of rely on FPSs. I mean, it's essentially, that's one of the things that made them run so effectively. But I think probably this is a bit of a lesson in terms of what it takes to make very original games. Right? If you make games that look and have features that are very similar to a lot of other games, right? So if you make a first-person shooter in the Unreal Engine, or you make a number of different types of game, like actually first-hand experience, it is, in my opinion, easier to make, not like by a lot, but it is easier to make a real-time game with sort of this continuous play area in Unity than it is to make a turn-based game with, say, tiles of some kind. You can buy different tools, and there's features built inside that will allow you to do those things. But I think it is fair to say that Unity out of the box is designed to be making sort of real-time games that take place in continuous space, as opposed to discrete turns and discrete areas. And you add a couple of things and then you can start working in those spaces. I'm not trying to suggest that they are hard problems, but they're an example in terms of the assumptions that go into the creation of the game. And so as a result, when you make a game that doesn't have a direct, you can't point to it and say, I want to make that thing, like Book of Hours. I imagine, or if you consider Cultist Simulator, right, a game that was confined to a single desk, I imagine that you start running into those problems of like, there are a whole lot of things that are being rendered on the screen right now, or could be rendered on the screen. So anyways, all of that long babble, really we should just let that post speak for itself, because one, they actually get to see what's going on, and two, can speak much more intelligently about it than I do. But I personally find that sort of stuff very interesting, and it's always a good reminder to just sort of know, whatever you think might be going on, very often is like, it's a complete fiction, right? You'll tell yourself the story, you'll be convinced this is the optimization they need to do or whatever. And then, you look at the data and it's like, oh, it's this weird little thing over here. Okay. Here we are. Welcome back, librarian. Everything is remembered. Hush House endures. So we've got our invitations set. We've got, we were going to host in the refectory, I believe. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. food items. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drinks. We will be ready to host the salon when the time comes. We're also actually at the end of the night, so I should probably just unpause and let things run by. I will maybe just double check that the many faceted lesson is still there. It's a bit embarrassing that I've actually let this thing run as long as I have. We're almost at the end of autumn, and that Numa was a while ago. But that's the choice I made. All right, so let's start with something simple. We'll read the Yellowwing newspaper for the occult scrap. Investigate the object. You won't use this up or consume it by doing this. All right, what else do we have? We'll have the many-faceted lesson a little bit. I guess it really comes down to what skills I want to level up. So before I flounder around too much, let's just see. Okay, so I got something about skills, but good lord, I'm having trouble reading this. So I'm assuming it's glass blowing and vessel crafting that I'm putting this into, because I wanted to take it up to 7. Glass blowing and vessel crafting. Oh no, I want to take it up to 8 actually. Okay. So that's not that hard to do. I think, right, so the perilous path and the sagging dock, I believe I was going to wait for the fisherman for that. So definitely leveling up glass blowing and vessel crafting. I don't see a situation where I need to hire someone new, so let's talk to Mr. Kill. Mrs. Kill, the midwife, is tall and gloomy. Mr. Kill, the undertaker, is slight and wry. For 10 years, she has drawn villagers into the world, and he has shaped cradles for their departure. But she can also whittle, and he can also paint. Mr. Kill always enjoys a chance to catch up with me. And the Sweet Bones has been the public house in Brankrug since Cromwell's time. Its history is notable, its beer is not. Guests looking for discreet employment or for discreet assistance congregate in the snug. I could offer help with correspondence and arithmetic. There's no school in Brankrug, and not everyone here knows their letters. Now, glassblowing and vessel crafting shouldn't be a very difficult one to get memories for. I think the other question would be, is there anything else that I want to be doing with my elements of the soul right now? And I guess, it still doesn't hurt to go to Crowcross Sands and take care of those things, so I'll maybe get those out of the way now. Let's use, I don't want to use a language just in case, but we can use snow stories, and then I will use pentiments and precursors for the walk on the moor. The last leaves toss and scutter. We're still kind of in a fall state. The trees are more or less bare right now, but I don't think we're going to be getting snow until next week. I actually don't really have a proper winter jacket, so I don't mind it when it's a bit warmer in here. But snow is nice. Okay, so with that, I think I should probably just queue up the memories. So Beguiling Melodies is a good option here, just because we know we'll use the sky. Stolen Secrets or something that a visitor might use. Oh, sorry, I should also take a look at... Oh dear. I'm going to consult my... Actually, you know what? Let me just see here. I know there's sometimes a little bit of a lag for people to come in, so it may not be a bad idea for me to just reorganize the library a little bit. I'm trying to remember what On Imperfections gives. just consulting my spreadsheet here. It gives us a pattern. Probably shouldn't have been a surprise. Okay, so we take on perfections. I'll add that to the pattern pile if I can. And that's why that's on its own. All right. So yeah, I've developed a little bit of a desk of lost books, but I think the time has come for us to get a little bit better at placing these things. So, this is my confounding parable shelf. This is an impulse shelf. Pattern. Oh, hang on. These are the patterns. So that's a good start. So impulse and foresight. So I don't know. Trying to think how I can test the shelf space here. Actually, I haven't really moved any of the music, so let's start with these. Okay, so I want to make sure that I have the right information. Sorry, I know it's silly to just be silent this whole time, but okay, so a beguiling melody and a fear. Now, obviously, this will not be enough for all of the music, and in fact, there is one that's in this little cubby hole here, the Velletri interviews. And then I don't know if I have a really intuitive place to put these right now. Because obviously we filled these desks. Well, you know, I think probably the right call here is to go to the threshold. Oh, this is a good trick. Let's grab the item, teleport. Oh. Clearly the way the designers intended the game to be played. Alright, so we will take the tower falls, tower rises. I'm going to put those in Collar's room. After all, it is permitted to him. Okay, so from here, I'm thinking maybe we make this the intuitions shelf. that fits rather nicely. So from there, we have foresight, so we'll do the same here. Now, Solace. I only have 3 books for Solace right now, and there's only 1 book for Secret Thresholds. I imagine if I try this tree... Oh, no. Okay. So let's clear that out. What I'm trying to think about now is for the Temptations of Architecture and Perugian Diaries, it feels like a shame to dedicate shelves. So Storms, for instance. Actually, let's just move this out of the way here. So I'm not saying, you know, we will find a home for these, but maybe we don't take up a full shelf for sort of a single book here. So Book of Masks, if I recall correctly, was an impulse. Oh, heavens. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let's just start by looking where the impulses are. So they're right here. Probably what I need to do is divide them over 2 shelves. Nope. That may not work, actually. Because if we only have space for 4, we have 5 up here. So that means... Well, that's fine. I'll just find something with a little more space. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that's going to put me in the same problem as before. 7 for Revelations. I'm wondering if there's a home for the Gossip. Thing is that I'm really just sort of trading one set for another, so I don't... Well, actually, there is something I can do here. So if we make that Gossip... Okay, so this helps us with a hindsight. That almost seemed like it would be clever, except that this is one of my more narrow shelves. So let's move Regrets over here. Oh, can I fit it? No, darn. So we're looking for is something with 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah. Okay, so let's try and find something with 7. I mean, I'm really just moving one for the other, so I don't think... feel like I should be able to fit more in the satisfaction. There we go. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I now have 2 whole shelves available, and I'm struggling to find the best place for some of these. Let's look a little bit further. So I don't really think I have something that will take up 5 spots. I mean, I can move the salt over, I suppose. Again, I don't know if that got me a whole lot more, but okay, yeah, so just room for 5. What I'm really looking for here is something that'll take 5 spots. Oh wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's funny, I have 3 whole shelves, but it does kind of matter where these things go. Okay, well, here's what I'm going to do. Let's actually move these over. I realize at this point it's just shuffling things around for the sake of shuffling, but so this is now the gossip shelf. What I'm going to try and do is maybe break up the contradictions or the revelations onto 2. So we'll make this one salt. And actually, if I think of it, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this will get me started with impulses. Until it doesn't. Okay, not a promising start. I only got 4 out of those. There's more shelf space here. I'm trying to think of the way, so I'm trying to think how I can clear, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if I do there's the impulses. This will go to contradictions. Okay, so there's the impulses, there's the contradictions. We need a new home for the cheerful ditty and the secret threshold. And I don't think so. The existing spaces aren't really going to work for this. I actually need to think about a new place to put things. Also, I'm going to start moving the flowers out. Oh, actually, I'll find a new place for the tea. Cheerful ditties. Secret thresholds. How you doing, Turburiosity? Sorry, just 1 second here. Okay. So what I wanted to do here was just move some of these texts that I want to read up. Not an ideal place, but you know, if I'm going to put bittersweets, or I mean, it would be kind of nice if I could put more books on this shelf. This does feel a little wasteful, but the question, I suppose, would be where else do I want to put them? What group do I want to move over? Maybe contradictions at some point. It'd be nice if I could do something like regrets, but I think this is a little too much. But I'll handle that later. Okay. So getting back onto the task, so we'll have 6 for glass blowing and vessel crafting, but I do want the remaining knock or sky to help me out. So I don't remember if horns and ivories had a knock. I think it might. It does. Although I'm trying to remember what place horns and ivories had in the overall plan. That is going to be a 9. So maybe I'll just hang on to that one. All right, so the green jasper tablet, that gives me rights of the roots, which if I recall correctly is, nectar and moth, which it is, so that doesn't help me with glass blowing and vessel crafting. However, Edict's Liminal does have a knock, and I believe that is already, we've already committed that. So I suppose the obvious choice here would be to read On the Matters and Deeds of Serpents. Now, I am kind of close to the time I'd want to make a choice on this, although again, if we wind up in Numa, there's a whole other set of problems. So let's start by reading On the Matters and Deeds of Serpents, and I think I'm going to need to read a book for that. You know, better still, let's just wait the 30 seconds and then we can use the paper. So I'll just double check. So we've got 8 from Edict's Liminal, we'll have 10 from Shapt, and we'll get 12 from... Oh no, hang on. I may not need to because of VAC. So if I add the VAC to the equation, we add 2 knock to the 8 knock that we get from Edict's Liminal. That's 10. Okay, so no, we can actually read, because it's a VAC text, we have part of the job done for us. So Edict's Liminal, Shapt. Nope, I gotta add the text. There we go. I am a match for this book. Enough knock to match mystery knock. Okay, moving on. as I said before, we are going to want to try and level this up, basically 3 levels. So at this point, it makes a lot of sense to just push as many memories as I can. And again, ideally, they're the ones that Mr. Kill won't generate. So Beguiling Melodies makes sense. We're already reading Intimations of the Skin, so I won't read that particular one. Stolen Secrets, something Mr. Kill might give me. Bittersweet Certainties doesn't help me with the knock or the sky. Confounding Parables does, though, and it's something that Mr. Kill may not necessarily give me. We'll start with the other line again. Revelations is something Mr. Kill can give me and isn't relevant, but Patterns is something that I'm not necessarily going to get. So let's just take this off the pile where there's the most. Reluctantly, I use the Tryst here. Trying to remember where we are on texts. I think we have already read Twin Serpent Tantra, so we're going to move on to just verse, and I'm also going to move the radical measure up. Okay, moving on. Hindsight doesn't help. Salt will. The Vagabond Desk. I'm trying to think. I should probably hold on to the Shaft for a little while, just because that's going to be something I can use to level up glass blowing and vessel crafting. So instead we'll use the metal. But what do I use it on? Okay, so patterns, hindsight. We did the salt. Satisfaction doesn't help. Regrets. Give me Winter and Forge. Gossip doesn't help. Foresight doesn't help. Contradictions doesn't help. Fears doesn't. The Solace we might get from Mr. Kill. Storms we might get from Mr. Kill, but Savage Hymns we don't. Impulses, intuitions. I feel like I'm missing an obvious candidate. But I'll let it run. We'll see what happens with Mr. Kill. I'm definitely not above just letting, or just like bringing in the simple ones if I have to. As for the rest, I think we will see how the day goes. Oh, sorry. Yes, we've already gone to Crowcross Sands and the Moor. I'm not going to go to the Gull Colony for the simple reason that I'm going to need my Faust to potentially level up glassblowing and vessel crafting. Okay. And it's a foggy day. That's actually going to help me out with leveling this up. I'm going to hold on to it, though, so that we can get it near the end. Mr. Kill can always spare a few hours to help a friend. Mr. Kill, Ryan Spry, doesn't mind stopping for a gossip. Now, I think this is going to be one of these cases where I speed the game up a little bit. I'm not going to do it right now just because we're almost done reading the paper, but I'm not opposed to speeding things along while we wait for some of the necessary steps. Okay, the Yellowing Newspaper, it's dated the year that Hush House was abandoned. Nothing's history when first it happens. So there we go. I'm not above restoring these at some point, but I think we'll be fine for our Elements of the Soul. Alright, dead men don't tell no bloody tales. Well, who'd listen? Okay, an afternoon spent profitably reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers through the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. I did forget to get myself some tea, so I may take a tea break a little earlier in the stream, but not yet. The intimations of skin, fiendishly complex, weirdly distorted illustrations of Congress and anatomy by the haunted visionary painter Niels Friedrich Malsker. Malsker illuminates the evolutions of the names of the Grail with unfortunate clarity. It seems that a lovely who consumes an ivory becomes an ivory, a lovely who consumes a thirstly becomes a thirstly, a lovely who consumes a name of another hour might take its place. The penultimate illustration, a lovely grapples with a fungoid knot that can only be a name of the crowned growth. The lovely's mouth and other portals gape wide, and the growth name is already partially engulfed, but it seems that Malsker couldn't bring himself to illustrate the result, and the final illustration is only a scrawled, bloated obscurity. All right, The Other Line, one of Samuel Savage's more thoughtful works, an allegorical play about the city Clarity, a city that is also a book, and the sentences which inhabit it. The Lord's Proverbial and the Lord's Disquisitional war in the streets of Clarity, while the punctuants get drunk on ink and supply the jokes, though by Savage's usual standards there aren't very many jokes. The final act sees the Lord's Proverbial unsealing the city Clarity's gate to expel the population into the unknown. The formula that they use for the unsealing is a real one. It can be used with knock and preliminal meter to create a gate sign of power. Crossing to Noon, the mystic Garcia Sowry gives a picturesque account of the adventures of Franklin Bancroft, Prince of Wines, and Ava de Wolf, the Pale Lady, on their way to the hidden island of Noon. For a long time, the Blackbone pondered her next move, until the moon dared to peep from behind a cloud, and the prince completed the composition of his third sestina. But the lady met the blind gaze of its open pores, waiting for the tide. Garcia Sowry acknowledges in an epilogue that it is widely known that Ava in fact tragically drowned herself and her twin infant granddaughters, without ever making such a journey. But he adds contemptuously, it is also widely known that the city unbuilt will so remain, and that only one history is ever written, and that Janus is a Mansus prank. The Singlefoot Songs. Father Stanislav John Schaller, priest and diplomat, writes of his time on the slopes of Huashan, near the Grove of Green Immortals, but never too near. Schaller's relations with the grove are cautious. It's a library of the tree, but under the hand of the hour named Applebright. In time, however, Schaller comes to be more sympathetic to the Applebright, which he suggests causes harm only when so invited. The Singlefoots of the title are one-horned, one-footed hill things with sweet but powerful voices, powerful enough to open the mountain. The Singlefoot sometimes trample pilgrims, sometimes heal them, sometimes coerce them to enter the mountain and become Singlefoots. Schaller explains that when he found this last becoming too tempting, he decided to return to his homeland. And finally, Just Verse, a rare surviving copy of Christopher Lopoli's notoriously unsuccessful volume of experimental poetry published in 1912. Alopoli is clearly more interested in the occult than the aesthetic aspects of the work. By most measures, the rhymes are contrived, the meter inconsistent, the imagery banal. Still, even the worst verses have a compelling quality, and I find myself drumming my fingers on the desk to accompany their rhythms. In an afterword, Alopoli discusses mnemonic holometaboli, by which he seems to mean a sort of crafting process where memories, when fed into a preliminal meter technique in the presence of enough knock or rose, can blossom and fissure into more potent versions of themselves. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 memories. We're good to go to level up our first glass blowing and vessel crafting, but it is going to get a little harder from here on out. Last time, something of an authority in this. Improve the skill to level 6. So I think the easy answer here is just to do everything that I did before, but this next time we're going to add the occult scrap to the bundle. So, from the left, Perugian Diaries. Also, I should have probably taken the secret threshold, so I don't even need to go that far. We should still be reading the other text we are. I think I will give up another tryst on this one. And it is written. Get another pattern. Which did we do? Radical measure. Okay, we've got hindsight, satisfaction, regret, gossip, foresight, contradictions, fears. I think it's just the unhatched hymns that I want. And for that we need Sabazine. I feel like I'm missing... Oh yeah, sorry, a salt book as well. Okay, from that point, I think we're good. Dead men don't tell no bloody tales? Well, who'd listen? So this was a bit of a gift. We get a stolen secret to play with. It'll probably just save us from using the occult scrap, but happy enough with that. All right, unexpected finds in the folds of earth and sky. Quartz chunk, ice, rock, winking light. So I'll refill the one, and then we'll add the fet here. And sea-strewn, salt-snared stuff. So we'll also renew that. The skill is now level 6. Its power aspects have also increased. Okay. We won't do anything with the foresight, but I'll add it to the pile. And again, it seems like almost a little silly to just rush like I am on the glass blowing and vessel crafting, but it's just an anticipation of the fact that we are about to change over seasons. On the matter and the deeds of serpents, this was probably the prophecies of the Naga rendered into English and illustrated by William Midnight in Paris in the 1880s, but it shows a number of divergences from that text. It's certainly quite recent by the standards of VAC texts. The serpent folk, called the Great Hooded Princes, came to know the order called the House of Leith and warred across the miles with them. They made an alliance with the Mother of Ants, whose children they had been. The text describes how the Great Hooded Princes escaped, or will escape, from the fifth history, where they had died, or were doomed to die. They engage in a secret conquest of the land of the Great River called India in some histories, and have ensured that all other conquests of that land are false conquests. Alright, so we will lose the secret threshold that we're getting from the Temptations of Architecture, but I'll live with that. We also have another companion for this one. Better now. So we'll just keep cycling through the sweet bones with the whist until we find something better to do with it. I could offer help with correspondence and arithmetic. There's no school in Brandkrug, and not everyone here knows their letters. Okay. So I'll leave the Perugian diaries. We did just read that recently. The Temptations of Architecture. The antiquarian and Nyctodromus Ambrose Westcott writes of the dangers of doors, with particular reference to a house in the bounds named Treowin. No doubt they have come to regret the ambitions of their winding stair even now in Treowin. A silver sea is unwisely visible from a rash window. Westcott explains that the wheel locks, the charge holders of Treowin, have had recourse to dramatic measure to prevent oniric encroachment, removing the entire top floor of the building. Nevertheless, he writes, the business of the Moon Hall has already begun to touch the other business of the house. The Radical Measure, Manifesto for Experimental and Dangerous-Sounding Invocatory Poetry, written sometime in the 19th century by Dr. Aaron Peel, a notoriously inconsistent and incoherent text, apparently produced in a tearing hurry. The hours have little time for poetry, Dr. Peel avers, but they have a tremendous amount of time for poets. As the rose opens, Dr. Peel explains, an enduring memory opens to the horizon, which is a way of saying something that cannot otherwise be said and is best only written with one's eyes firmly closed. The unhatched hymns, hymns attributed to St. Lucia the Eyeless, patron of glassworkers and name of the hour called Meniscate. The hymns venerate every sanctioned hour, celebrating them as the sun undivided, but also suggesting that each hour may become the next. Madrigad to watchman, watchman to wolf, and so on. The hymn of the phases celebrates the Meniscate from whom we do not turn, for the truth which is beauty, the beauty which is truth, and the perfect balance between the two. The hymn of reflections, more puzzlingly, celebrates the Meniscate as sister of Janus, mother of shadow, whose visage wondrous in emptiness can reveal all truths. It is written, Musgrave, fourth of the De Wolf line, writes tentatively about the covenant of Brankrug and the legacy of the sacred inks he calls Incasta Potentialia. As the light passeth through a prism into many colors, so the great inks separateth into the lesser inks, and the lesser inks into inks minor. Musgrave coyly refuses to talk of the great inks, or else refuses to admit he doesn't know much about them. He insists that Ugol and Stargol, which can be mixed with sufficient nectar of sky or sky aspect, are sufficient for most befitting purposes. The Queen's Turn, a 16th century translation of the Barrowchild's account of Lagia's turn, when Lagia, the queen unsated, was offered the opportunity to enter the service of the hours of the Triple Knot, as long as she repudiated her brother-lover Antaios. Lagia accepts, setting aside the arts of the low red sun associated with Antaios. She bargains, however, for freedom for her daughters. The hours of the Triple Knot accept casually, knowing that Lagia has devoured her daughters, but wily Lagia has decided in the secret hollow of her heart that she will adopt any who ask, if they can prove their fierceness. The traditions described here, the ones generally described as hill and hollow, are associated with Lagia before her turn, but now that she's a name of the Red Grail, they might also be safely used before an altar of the Triple Knot. So, let's get our next level of glassblowing and vessel crafting, again, once we have this up to level 8. Oh, hang on. This is definitely the combination I want to use. Although perhaps I can spare us another reading of Perugian Diaries. When I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. So again, we'll do a similar round as last time, but this is to get the last level that we need. And actually at this point, so we'll say we've got 2 of the 7. So I actually really just need 5 more of these. So that's 1. Two. Where were we? There we go. 3. No, we just read this one. 4. And I think I got a little bit ahead of myself. So yeah, we can do Perugian Diaries again. I'm not going to feel too bad about that. Oh, it was salt that I wanted. Shame on me. Oh well. Do I have any other uses for... Oh yeah, actually, I have a cheerful ditty already. Good lord. I really messed this one up. Larkabine Codex. Okay, so that's going to be it for the glassblowing and vessel crafting, I don't want to... I don't want to completely waste the rest of the day. I don't want to pursue any other books more aggressively either. So let's just think about what we can do. Okay, so quenchings and quellings is already where it needs to be. So everything for hushery is accounted for. Right, Skolakosophy, the blocker is orchids and narcotics, which, if memory serves, there was a lot of stuff that wanted... nectar and grail. Okay, well, let's see what's on the shelf. So my immediate options, Gospel of Zacchaeus will give me knock and scale. Green Jasper Tablet gives me nectar. So technically both of these are things that I need to use. Chandler's Wish will help me with Inks of Revelation, but Inks of Revelation's already where it needs to be, so that can help me with Purifications and Exaltations. I suppose technically I was going to try and level up Stone Stories with the nectar. In Memory of Gods is actually a bit of an open question because we don't have a use for the existing Ragged Crossroads that I've already used. I think a same argument to be made can be made for the Deeds of the Scarred Captain. No, actually Insects and Nectars can use the moon. Actually, that's almost ideal because I'll get 2 out of that. Okay. I'm going to start taking some notes. Okay. Deeds of the Scarred Captain translates into... Insects and Nectars. We can maybe say the Chandler's Wish. Let me just double check. So we had Sacrosolus Invicti, which was eventually going to be level 9. But I feel like Purifications and Exaltations may be a better choice right now. How are you doing, Vesper Fortune? How are the Salons? You are actually just in time to see one. I'm probably going to have a small tea break. Well, okay, let's be honest, a medium tea break because I know the kettle is empty and I'm going to have to... It's getting cold out, so it'll need a little bit more time to warm up, but it'll be worth it. All right. So Chandler's Wish will take Purifications and Exaltations up to 4. And this should take Insects and Nectars to 7. Now, Insects and Nectars, I think, needed to be at 7, so that's a good one to start with. I'm really just going right to left on the list here. Each flame has fuel. Glazier and lightsmithing. It does feel a little bit of a shame to use it for things. Actually, where is Glazier and lightsmithing? That may be higher than I thought. Oh dear. I have a decent mental image of what the icon look. I'm gonna freak out if we have somehow neglected to add that to the list. Okay, I'm actually just gonna go from top to bottom because I'd be shocked if we didn't have all the skills at this point. It's Quenchings and Quellings, Edicts Martial, Coil and Chasm, Disciplines of the Scar, Edicts Liminal, Path and Pilgrim, Tradis Mahaira, Preliminal Meter, Transformations Liberation, Sickle and Eclipse, Leave and Thorns, Drums and Dances, Inks of Revelation, Wolf Stories, Watchman's Paradoxes, Menescate Reflections, Hill and Hollow, Sights and Sensations, Edicts Inviolable, Pyroglyphic, Sacrolamea, Applebright Euphonies, Horns and Ivory, Sky Stories, Rhyme and Remembrance, Herbs and Infusions, Insects and Nectars, Stitching and Binding, Spices and Savors, Sea Stories, Surgeries and Exsanguinations, Bells and Braziaries, Weaving and Knotworking, Strings and Songs, Inks of Power, Megaphine Mysteries, Stone Stories, Putrefactions and Calcinations, Orchids and Narcotics, Sharps, Inks of Containment, Desires and Dissolutions, Rites of the Roots, Pearl and Tide, Disciplines of the Hammer, Ragged Crossroads, Auroral Contemplations, Serpent's Venoms, Door and Wall, Ambry and Lapidary, Lockworks and Clockworks, Purifications and Exaltations, Solutions and Separations, Furs and Feathers, Resurgences and Emergences, Sacrosolus and Victi, The Great Signs and Great Scars, and nothing. Alright, so I feel like I should probably be reading Each Flame is Fuel before too long, although we still don't really have a very good sky text. Also, I hope you are feeling more rested, Vesper. It's been kind of quiet tonight, but I'm happy to give you a shout out. Vesper Fortune is somebody who I found through Book of Hours and Cultist Simulator. So I think what happened was one evening I was looking to host a Book of Hours stream, didn't have anybody available, so Vesper Fortune was the best available. Vesper Fortune was playing Cultist Simulator, so it felt on brand, and I had a lot of fun watching him and hanging out with him. He is an incredibly generous individual when he talks about my alleged smarts. The problem is that the more that they get talked up, the far more disappointing it is when people find out what I really am like. But nonetheless, I definitely like hanging out with him. He has been very generous, both with his gifts in terms of what he's given to the stream, his attention both as a viewer and also as a broadcaster, and just overall as somebody who's very patient with my more trolly nature in some cases. But in any case, someone I'm very happy to have hanging around. Let's keep going. So like I said, I did want some tea, but let's focus on what I can do first. 26 enticements, 7 torments. There's actually a few different arguments for this one because I believe this will give me both Grail and Moth, and I have uses for both Grail and Moth. So Resurgences and Emergences, if I'm not mistaken. Grail and Moth. Grail and Moth. So for that one, there's actually a small argument for using that for Leaves and Thorns, actually. Because that'll get me to the top on that. Okay. I'm going to do it. Okay, so that's Leaves and Thorns taken care of. Deaths and their evasions, that's another Edict's Liminal. So we've already got the glass blowing and vessel crafting in place, so that's a Moth and Knock one. The sky has already been taken care of for that, so really we're just looking for things that, well, either things that need Moth, we've got lots that need Moth, or things that use Knock, and we have fewer of those in general. I suppose we can use it for Horns and Ivories. That would bring us 2 more than we previously had. Serpents and Venoms really keeps weirding me out because I feel it should be Nox. Torments, not tortures. I don't know if that changes the answer, though. All right, what else are we looking for? Solutions and separations and preliminal meter. Actually, no, sorry, preliminal meter is where it needs to be, so. Which actually tells me that purifications and exaltations should be even higher on the list than it is. Okay, so it looks like the only real knock home that I have for things right now would be horns and ivories, so I will adjust accordingly. Manual for departure is door and wall. I believe that's knock and forge. Yeah. And I don't actually have a place for that yet. Okay. Do I have any roll for some forge here? Not really. Well, no, Enbury and Lapidary, maybe. Okay. The secret colors. So for the moon, I'm thinking we probably use that for edicts inviolable. Algrins! Thank you very much for your continued support. 2 years of subscriptions. Hard to believe, but one I'm very grateful for. Thank you. You know what? I think as happy as I would like to kind of keep going down this path, but I think I've got more than enough for me to read for the rest of the day. So what I am going to do, though, I'm trying to think if there's any sense in me trying to read the Gospel of Zacchaeus, because that should just give me one memory. And it's not that hard for me to dig up 5 horns and five memories. So I got 2, 4, 6. Oh yeah. Yeah, you know what? I think we're going to do this. So, Gospel of Zacchaeus, we'll just read that with edicts liminal. Well, I should be careful, because if I don't have a moth desk to read it at, it's very likely I don't. Oh, no, sorry, I keep forgetting the governor's desk does have moth. Okay, so it really doesn't matter what we throw in here. I'm going to put the fet just because I can. I am a match for this book, enough knock to match mystery knock. So it's a little late in the day for me to be doing this, but I think it's worth it. I'll maybe wait until we finish leveling up glass blowing and vessel crafting before I commit too hard. Dead men don't tell no bloody tales. Well, who'd listen? So at this point, I'm not expecting miracles from Mr. Kill, but it's just kind of a nice to have on a few of these things. Okay, so unexpected finds in the folds of earth and sky. Sea-strewn, salt-snared stuff. It is autumn when the leaves rustle. The silent landlady has served me apple pie with steamed cream in the window nook. Oops. Okay, the Geminiad, Volume 3, a fragile manuscript illuminated with twin shapes of sad and luminous beauty, and with all the phases of the moon. It might be as old as the 7th century, but the language Fusine is much older. Coral decorates its cover, and its page edges are sharp enough to slash a throat. These pages outline the nature and doctrines of an hour that demands the union of what has been separated. An hour that is sought at the water's edge and beneath the moon. The witch and sister. The language is elusive, enigmatic, intricate. It'll take some untangling. Believe it or not an edge text. Although I know what you're saying. The third volume of the Geminiad reminds us that the witch and sister has been known to manifest as the sister and witch, and that this face may heal while the other face is always hungry. It implies connections between the witch and sister and the hours of the wood, especially the secret keeper called the Velvet, but it is ambiguous on whether the witch and sister is a wood hour proper, and it speaks at length about the sadness of the two who are one, the sadness that remains, for their time as flesh. The Locksmith's Dream, Portions and Proportions, the second volume of Teresa Galmier's examination of parallels in the mystic dreams of artisans. The frontispiece has been slashed with a razor. In this volume, Galmier records fewer dreams and explicates more on her own elaborate theories. We see this again and again. What is below can't escape what is above. The finest artisans all dream of the white door in the end. I'm no artisan, only a scholar. I think there's a secret that all these artisans know, but I think that secret is only half the story. Okay, on we go. The Singlefoot songs. We have read this recently, but we got a few more people inside the. No, the witch and sister I think are still the same aspect. Vesper, unless I'm completely losing it. Singlefoot songs. Father Stanislav John Schaller, priest and diplomat, writes of his time on the slopes of Huashan, near the Grove of Green Immortals, but never too near. Schaller's relations with the grove are cautious. It's a library of the tree, but under the hand of the hour named Applebright. In time, however, Schaller comes to be more sympathetic to the Applebright, which he suggests causes harm only when when so invited. The Singlefoots of the title are one-horned, one-footed hill things with sweet but powerful voices, powerful enough to open the mountain. The Singlefoot sometimes trample pilgrims, sometimes heal them, sometimes coerce them to enter the mountain and become Singlefoots. Schaller explains that when he found this last becoming too tempting, he decided to return to his homeland. The Larkabine Codex. Christopher Larkabus claimed to have purchased 2 handwritten copies of the Codex from a family of witches on the shores of the Sea of Marmara. A third was given to the sea. The sister and witch came from the west, where they were born in 2 wombs, one a princess, one a monster. Nevertheless, they loved each other from birth, and met in secret to seek union. When the great drought came, the kings of that land tried to sacrifice the princess and the witch, so they sailed across the sea. When despair took them, they flung themselves into the drowning waters, and so found the Painted River, where they entered the Mansis through the offices of the Red Grail. Nevertheless, the Codex ends with a condemnation of the Grail. The Radical Measure, glossed. The original Radical Measures was a manifesto for experimental poetry with occult properties, written in the 19th century by Dr. Aaron Peel. The original is notoriously incoherent. Much later, Christopher Olopoli took on the task of editing and glossing it. He has taken some liberties, but the updated version is generally well regarded. The hours have little time for poetry, Dr. Peel avers, but they have a tremendous amount of time for poets. Alopoli has added a note suggesting that this should in fact be the most tremendous time with poets. As the rows open, Dr. Peel explains, enduring memory opens to the horizon. This is a way of saying something that cannot otherwise be said and is best only written with one's eyes firmly closed. Alopoli's gloss reads, Horizon Sight Synthesis Method. Reverse procedure with knock to elaborate Gervinite in the Chronsichord mode. Okay, and finally, the Perugian Diaries. In 1907, at the age of 18, Christopher Alopoli left Strathcoyne's household to study theology at the University of Perugia in Italy, enrolling under the name Christopher Strathcoyne. For 4 years, since his adoption from a Bristol orphanage, Alopoli served as Strathcoyne's pupil and protege, but his relationship with this austere and secretive man was always complicated. His journal confides, I still think Fraser's intentions are good, certainly he agrees, but I never understood the final goal of his investigations. He was never prepared to enlighten me, and good intentions or not, I can no longer bear this dream of eyes. We have agreed to part almost amicably. Alopoli had left Perugia in 1909 without completing his degree. He had long lost interest in his studies, and the latter half of his journal is concerned with his studies of Umbrian folk songs and notes towards his own compositions, which are of widely varying quality. One of the better ones, In the Marshes of Night, suggests he visited the site of Old Lake Fucinus near Ortuccio. Okay. I'm going to catch up on my... I'm sorry I've been a little delinquent on chat, but I am one... Okay, I've got something really stupid to confess, but I'm also kind of eager for my tea. So I'm going to get through this real quick. The confession is that I had some sushi to eat when I got home. And I had like a small snack, but I've been sort of sitting the whole stream wondering, like, why am I so hungry? And it's occurred to me that I thought about the sushi. I never ate the sushi. So here's what I'm going to do. I know we're not done the end of the day, but I am going to take some time. I'm going to fill the kettle, put it on, boil it, so on and so forth. I'm also going to really quickly eat some dinner. So I don't want this break to be too long, but it is going to be, like it's more than just the rushed tea break. I am actually going to take some time to eat and, be just less distracted during the stream. So if you would like to get up, have a stretch, run around, take care of yourself, do whatever needs getting done, definitely 3 pounds. Definitely do that. I will try not to keep it too long, but I also know, I kind of know what happens when I try to do too many things in a rush. I usually just either burn myself or otherwise come back and have to fix a whole bunch of stuff during the stream. So it'll be a couple of minutes, but I want to try and be as upfront of that as I can. So I will see you all in a few minutes. Please enjoy your own break. And for those of you that just want to sit around for the ads, your time has come. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I realized that was a lot longer than I wanted it to be. I haven't actually finished my sushi. It's not that there was a lot of it, just I got pulled away by something else. But I'll maybe try and snack on it a little bit as the stream goes by, because I feel, yeah, I sort of feel like if I let the time goes by too much, like there's a certain point at which I sort of feel if I'm going to be away from the stream for a certain period of time, I really should just kind of turn it off and say, I'll be back in half an hour or something like that. So anyways, I do appreciate all of your patience with that. I know it's never great to just sort of be sitting around, although I realize that you're all also not going to behave like a cat and just paw away at the door waiting for me to come back. All right, so we are leveling up we're leveling up glass blowing and vessel crafting. Now I also want to double check. Okay, so we're reading Gospel of Zacchaeus now. Gospel of Zacchaeus is going to be used to level up horns and ivories. Now, as far as things that I can use to level up horns and ivories, those are scale and knock lesson or memories. So we've already got one. So we really just, need 4 more. But the composition of what I can use is a bit different. So we'll grab one of our whist. So one of the first ones I can think of would be unhatched hymns. And for that, that's just for the scale. So we'll throw the Sabazines there. So we've got 2 of the 5 that we need now. Moving on. Technically, Stolen Secrets would work here, but we may get that from Mr. Kill. However, I could read... we'll do Temptations of Architecture again, and then On the Matters and Deeds of Serpents. So that's 3 of 5. This won't help this time. Where are we? 4 of 5. So I just need a 5th. Hindsight, salt works. And that one needs Kilisimi. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set aside the 1 health now, just so that I can level up the horns and ivories. I figure I might as well make the most of the autumn, so we will do one last walk on the moor in this season. Likewise, we will visit Crowcross Sands. I know I just basically pile up a bunch of rocks and wood at this point, but we, we can't pick which outcomes we get. In this case, I feel a little more comfortable visiting the gull colony. Come on. Steal eggs from the seabirds or find what the seabirds have stolen. So give them the sky stories. And then it would not be a bad idea to get a little gardening done. I don't really need another pitcher of water, but I'm going to do it. Lower the bucket creaking into the dark. We'll grab some vegetables to tide us over for the season, and then anything left over we'll put towards the flowers. So, writes the roots. I think there's a... Well, we could use Crack Track, but I don't want to do that. It's tempting to use the languages sometimes because they don't take away something that... I've got tea. I don't need water. Water's just pre-tea. But yeah, so three, like, the sacks of vegetables are helpful in a number of different ways. I think we'll also grab pears. And then we'll kind of make do with whatever else we find in the gardens. But the main stuff that I was going for is in hand. Keep forgetting spices and savors as an option. I also never remember if there's something... Yeah, so I think this one... Oh, fair enough. So do I want more Trumpeter's Lily, or do I want another pear? I think I'm going to go for more pears in this case. Fragrant pears, soft in the hand. So, I mean, maybe I'll find something clever to do with the fat, but I think I'm okay leaving that if it comes down to it. All right, dead men don't tell no bloody tales. Well, who'd listen? Sorry, I had another piece of sushi right at the time I needed to do some reading. This is why I wanted to take the time to eat. Glass blowing and vessel crafting. We are all vessels. Let us contain only what will grace us when the light shines through. Here's a blank. Who was it that said, "Hey, Zerogdri, how you doing?" Another fine set of emotes, as always. Ah, all right. The Gospel of Zacchaeus, an extremely heterodox account of the Nazarene Messiah and his works, describing his ascension to the mansus through the opening of his body. 7 were the wounds of his body, 7 the doors of the house, 7 the lesser aspects of the hours, and knock the aspect above all, for the mother of ants is the mother of salvation. The book includes a description of a rite which can be used to raise a corpse to half-life, in memory of he who bled for the wood, but the marginalia claim that the mother of ants no longer permits use of this rite. So another stolen secret. Oh, 2 horns and ivories. Okay, I'm actually going to have a few more memories than I want crossing over into another season, but I'm not too worried. Even if we get Numa, like, I can work through it. It just means I'll probably have less to do in terms of breaking up the different memories and such. But I only have the one element of the soul that I can work with, so we're definitely going to be sitting on some more opportunities with the memories. Well, actually, maybe just move these down here. Unhatched hymns. Hymns attributed to St. Lucia the Eyeless, patron of glassworkers and name of the hour called Meniscate. The hymns venerate every sanctioned hour, celebrating them as the sun undivided, but also suggesting that each hour may become the next, madrigad to watchman, watchman to wolf, and so on. The hymn of the phases celebrates the Meniscate from whom we do not turn, for the truth which is beauty, the beauty which is truth, and the perfect balance between the two. The hymn of the reflections, more puzzlingly, celebrates the Meniscate as the sister of Janus, mother of shadow, whose visage wondrous in emptiness can reveal all truths. So there's the Savage hymn for the scale. The Temptations of Architecture. The antiquarian and nyctodromist Ambrose Westcott writes of the dangers of doors, with particular reference to a house in the bounds named Treowin. No doubt they have come to regret the ambitions of their winding stair even now in Treowin. A silver sea is unwisely visible from a rash window. Westcott explains that the wheel locks, the charge holders of Treowin, have had recourse to dramatic measures to prevent oniric encroachment, removing the entire top floor of the building. Nevertheless, he writes, the business of the Moon Hall has begun to touch the other business of the house. Now, this was actually a bit foolish of me to select because the secret threshold doesn't help. Oh, no, sorry, the secret threshold does because of the knock, sorry. For some reason, I thought for a minute it was Sky, but no, I'm just losing my mind. The Deaths of the Moon, a historical tract on various forms of survival after death. When the heart no longer beats, the grail may keep the spirit in the body, and an appetite is indicated to sustain. Alukites are the best known, but not the only of this nature. This is the waning moon mode. The full moon mode is the intensification of one element of the soul to the point where ordinary sustention is unstable. Our protector, the generous of hosts, began of this nature, and its generosity remains ungentle. It is possible for the body's health or the heart's core to outpace the other elements, so that a static mode becomes impossible and growth proceeds in dramatic stages until balance remanifests. And finally, Udrokahas, an anonymous confessional account of unsanctioned activities by the nuns of St. Brendan's. The title is a Hennevic phrase that might be translated as "the spirit flees the shadowed places." The author writes guiltily of her dealings with hill children and carapace relics. She suggests that she herself has a connection with one of the carapace kinds. Most of these dealings are trivial, but she claims to have arranged the death of the marcher Lord William de Braose, called Black William. De Brause's wife, Ava, evidently seeks the abbey's help to free her from her hated husband. Subsequently, he is found in the bedchamber of the wife of Llewellyn the Great, Prince of the Welsh, while attempting to negotiate the marriage of his daughter, also Ava, to Llewellyn's son. Llewellyn takes this badly. De Braose is hanged. The sister Ava inherits his estates and makes a substantial endowment to St. Brendan's. In the author's telling, de Braose was innocent of all but cruelty, and the adulterer found in the bedchamber was a shape-changing undergoer. So why did I think that this was going to give me... because I had it with the patterns. All right, that's a little awkward, but we'll be able to get through this still. So we take the consider verb. We want to improve horns and ivories. So one there. We take the fear, the savage hymn, the secret threshold, the salt. So impulse clearly doesn't help us here. So in this case, I think, yeah, the stolen secret will do. And we employ our health. At last, I'm something of an authority in this. Improve the skill to level 6. So the other option was I could use the earth sign and then we just use the fet to restore it, but either one really works. So I'm not expecting much here. If I wanted, I could try and throw the fet at... I guess there isn't really a moth and edge or rose and edge. But what we're going to do here is we'll keep the lesson of many facets. We'll use that overnight. And if we wind up in Numa, you'll just hear some soft weeping. All right, unexpected finds in the folds of earth and sky. Animal bones. What remains? The scale is now level 6. Its power aspects have also increased. Sea-strewn, salt-snared stuff. So I'll take the contraband jetsam and put this in a spot which is more likely for me to work with. Although again, the spare places are a little hard to come by now. All right, and for each of these, we're just gonna put these on the bridge. Gather the scented blossoms of the fragrant chalice, a glorious globe of wine-colored flowers. Fragrant pears soft in the hand, as smooth as butter and wonderfully juicy. A little water splashes on the stones of the well to nourish the mosses there. So I think we've filled up the keeper's law. Oh no, got room for this. You keep thinking of the Numa Numa theme? One day, when I don't fear copyright claims, I'll play the Numa song when, or the Numa song when the season comes by. Carrots, tomatoes, marrows, and blessed onions, all the unsung heroes of the stew pot. And if you don't mind, I'm gonna have a piece of sushi. Yum, yum. I believe... Let me just take a quick look. Where is it? Huh. So my impression was that it's related to sort of a name. Um, so when I looked it up and the thing that I was looking for, so I had like nomen, um, but that may not actually be. It may not be it. I do also see Noom. Um, sorry, I'm just running back to through the etymology here. So, numus alternative for numus. Oh, interesting. Coin, huh? Huh. All right, this is going to give me all sorts of fun to to pursue, but absolutely none of this is going to be interesting for Twitch. How are you doing tonight, Vanguard Master? Night has fallen, dawn will come soon. So because the timer's going so fast, I want to be really careful with the many-faceted lesson. We've gone a whole season now without using this thing yet. Doing all right? Busy as per usual? I am certainly no stranger to that. I'm glad you make time for the stream still. Okay, so I think, as we'd said before, when it comes to winter, I'm gonna make sure that we don't have a visitor who's already invited to the salon. But what I'm gonna be doing here is I'm going to once that's done, we want to start as early as we can with the salon. And that'll mean that I don't try to level up any skills. So a lot of this sort of rests on what happens. I was gonna say it's raining, but I haven't seen the switch. But yes, now we've got the switch to winter. What's happening in the world beyond Brandkrug? What visitors will the season bring? We'll draw either a new incident, find a suitable visitor for the current incident, or retire the current incident if there are no visitors left for it. So this is the affair of the unfinished lark. We'll read about the event when it's drawn, but I think right now a lot of this really rests. Well, there's one thing I can do. I have plenty of whist, so we can open the package. Contraband jetsam, flung overboard in furtive haste. Who threw this overboard? It's a little bit of a waiting game while we see who the visitor is. All right, Mr. Eason Fekri. Is there someone en route to Hush House? Formerly, Eason was a healer. He was not human. He was Secretary Salvant of Hush House, but not all at the same time. Fussy, kind, famously foul to look upon. All right, so we'll let Eason do his thing. It seems to me like we can send out the invitations now, so I will head to the post office. The postmistress keeps the gate to the wider world. In her left hand is the lightning, which is to say the telegraph, and in her right the thunder, which is to say the only telephone in Brandkrug. Before her lies the cash register, which accepteth the greater currency and returneth its lesser children. The postmistress can break larger currency into change, but don't tempt her anger with so mean and small a coin as this. So let's get the mail sent out. Stamp, envelope, send. I'm unhappy to report that. So, like I said, I've got a Weather Factory Etsy order, which is on the wrong side of the Canada Post strike, and I believe today it was announced that the mediator has basically said these guys have no idea how to solve this. I give up. So, I am enjoying my 2026 arrival of my goodies, but it's fine. Like, honestly, half of the fun is just supporting Weather Factory. I actually kind of feel like the stuff is more secure in the sorting office, to be honest. So, all right, so we are on to the affair of the unfinished lark. For 3 years, the sculptor adept Zuthimalim Zidane has labored at his masterpiece, an abstract sculpture that speaks with the voice of the desert lark, and now puzzlingly and suddenly he is dead. It is good to be back. Thank you for seeing me. I had been planning to visit next autumn to see Zuthi one more time, and now I'll never have the chance. However long one lives, one does not grow entirely accustomed to the suddenness of death. Try a book with as much mystery sky as their sky interest. What do you got? Cree the gaming you mean for the gaming are you talking about the lady afterwards? Good for you. Yeah, I mean, this is the tricky thing, right? Like, I always like trying new things, and sometimes they aren't always necessarily going to fit. Like, I think I kind of understand the disconnect in terms of the like you said, I definitely kind of keep that feedback in mind whenever I talk about it, because to me, I sort of understand why it's not like a more common source book for RPGs. But the thing is that, like, I knew enough going in that I was expecting something a little bit more like a murder mystery party, like, you know, an Evening of Murder or whatever they're called. The good news is that there is now a sixth history product, which I think is actually a little bit more along the lines of like a source book, which is, you know, going to go into more depth of the setting. Again, I can't speak to it. I think it's Threepwood. I want to say 007, but I think that may be wrong. Anyways, I know they go by the name Threepwood. That's a hard one to forget if you've played Monkey Island. But I'm hoping that scratches the itch for people who are maybe feeling a bit short on it. But, you know, again, for me, like, I kind of know, like, this is a tough one to say in general. I definitely think that Weather Factory products will show more of the... I have a feeling that Weather Factory products would show more of the world, you know, like Book of Hours does. But I don't know if there would ever be a, you know, here's it all laid out for you kind of product. Because I think some of what makes these games work is the fact that there's a lot to sort of chew on. And I don't necessarily think that's... I think you can probably do a source book that still leaves enough place for mystery. But I definitely feel that this game does sometimes live a little bit in the gaps, and specifically what you bring to sort of fill them in. Well, this is actually, so this is a chance for me to sort of plug the book that Alexis Kennedy, the lead designer on this, put out. So there are two books that Weather Factory have released. There was the snare. Sorry, actually, I've got them on the shelf here. So there's the world building one, which is a collection of essays. I have them in my hand now. Actually, I got to give the organizers of the writing group at work were taking some well-deserved time off, so they wanted to get some people to sort of run some just some sessions, because we do them at lunch hour, right? Like it's on our own time basically. So I thought it'd be kind of interesting to do one on gaming, and I thought, like, basically what I wanted to do for that session was, I imagined that if we were going to talk about gaming, there would be lots of talk about some of the stories that people like, because like I like those stories too. So Assassin's Creed, it's fun, right? It's fun to go through that history and see the fun little connections that they make and all of the the popular characters from that time. But if I sit down and think, and like, again, I've never written a game, so I'm really just kind of going with okay, here's a few games that I think have done something interesting. Here are some things that I've read in terms of books that I think have interesting things to say about the experience. And is there a way that I can sort of map this to the conversation? I sort of figured that, like, actually, what? Sorry, this is going to be a little off topic for Book of Hours, but I might actually share the example that I started with. I'll do it after this. But basically what I wanted to do is, like, I imagine that there's going to be some conversations about Assassin's Creed and how fun that is. And the one drawback I see with it is that if you think about the cinematics and the big set pieces that make those very exciting, they're like little short films. They're actually not the game, right? The game is the part that you're doing something in. And usually those very exciting big story bits are when the story, like, it's kind of like when you are put on hold, like the game puts you on pause and says, I'm going to do my thing now. And I don't want to trash that, because I have a lot of fun with it. But the analogy that I sort of wanted to draw, and again, there are far more intelligent people who are practitioners in this, who are writing and talking about it. So please just keep in mind that this is me trying to have an interesting conversation as something off the beaten path in terms of the writers group. But there was a time when comic book writing was, like, comics were this disreputable medium basically for children. And, you either did it if you really, really loved it, or if you had no other options. And then there's a bit of development that gets done on it. There were some adoptions of sort of film techniques, the sort of stuff that you'd see in, like, Citizen Kane or whatever. And this is a smart move, because of course you are learning lessons from another form of visual storytelling, and you're applying them to try and raise the bar in terms of the types of expressions that you can give. But Alan Moore has an essay on writing comics, and I mean, actually, the funny thing is that the afterword basically says, I don't do any of the stuff that I wrote in this essay. Which, fair enough. But it is kind of interesting from his estimation, is that was an advance in terms of comics writing. But that if it remains with that, you have, you have this, basically you have movies that don't move. And so comics will always live in the shadow of this inspiration or this technique that they brought in. So it's a good thing that they did. They learned the lessons from filmmaking in terms of ways to tell stories visually, or improve ways of telling stories visually. But you don't want to stop there, because basically film will have a permanent advantage at that point. And I think there's something to be said for the fact that the first comic that was on the time, or the only comic that was on the Time 100 list, was Watchmen. And Watchmen was very specifically crafted, Alan Moore, right? Very specifically crafted to be unfilmable. Not that they didn't try. I personally did not care for the adaptation. But I actually quite enjoyed that comic. It's one of the few that I can say I've read. So there's a handful of comics that I've read. But here's the thing that bugs me about this, right? Is that there's so much that was made about the fact that it's like completely faithful to the comic. And I'm like, okay, so first of all, we already know what the authors of the comic think about faithful to the comic. Actually, I don't know what Dave Gibbons' feeling about that is, but like, yeah, it's first of all, so that's already kind of starting off on the wrong foot. And then it's like, okay, so shot for shot, so what exactly are you bringing to this equation? But then when it's inconvenient for the story or the movie, they abandon that, right? The whole, pirate ship subplot, the comic in the world with superheroes, that's abandoned. Just saw a news item that I want to. Okay. And then they changed the ending because again, it's inconvenient. So it's an adaptation premised on being faithful to the source material until they don't. I don't quite know why that film needs to exist. And the thing is, like, a lot of people like it. I know people who worked on it. It was shot in Vancouver, right? They liked working on it. They like it. People who are not at all connected to film like it. I get that I'm probably just being a big old grouch about it. But, I don't care for it for several reasons. Anyways, the main point that I wanted to make out of this is that, I think you can get to a point where you are no longer in sort of a disrespected or disreputable form of storytelling. And you are still instead of, you're now at this point where they are sort of standing on their own. They're becoming a sort of standalone thing that are recognized for their own merits. I think it would be fair to say that probably nowadays people wish comics were maybe a little bit less popular. We've got the monkey's paw scenario here where like everything is science fiction, everything is fantasy, everything is a comic adaptation. And most of the people who like that stuff, I'm not a big comics guy, but I think most of the people who like that basically can't stand it now. I think there is something, just going back to the analogy, right? I think there's actually something to be said for thinking this way in terms of games, because, it is definitely fair to say there are some games which basically feel like the people who made it wanted to be in Hollywood, and for whatever reason they were making games instead. And I will count games that I really, really enjoy in that category. But to me, it follows that the question would be, what is unique about gaming? What is unique about a game story that if you want to go and you want to make your mark, what is it that would be something that says this is a story that only could have been told in gaming? Cultist Simulator, I think, is a good candidate for that, right? Because Cultist Simulator takes place in your head, and there's no point where the game puts you on hold and says, I'm going to take over now. The simulator part is not just a clever bit of marketing to sound like Goat Simulator. You are going through that process of being confused and only being given a glimpse at a much bigger world and trying to figure out what that means while telling a more practical, or not practical, but the sort of story about sort of the tension between the expectations of day-to-day life and the the desire to sort of achieve your great work. And again, I've talked about what I think kind of is going on in terms of Book of Hours, and again, the interactivity is an important part of making this story work. And another example that I would actually take for this, and this one's a bit of a harder one if you want to think as a writer or storyteller, but you can also take a look at games like RimWorld, right, which is actually sort of sold as a story generator. And in that case, they're really relying on the fact that they've created a set of conditions for you, the player, to sort of draw the connections with and tell your own story with. And in that case, that I wouldn't even say that's a particularly new style, right? The same thing basically happens in The Sims. But I think that's another good example in terms of how story can work inside of games. Yes, emergent gameplay. Or emergent storytelling, I suppose. So the the idea here is you can sort of say like, okay, so there's some building blocks here, and clearly if you can sort of nudge people, one way or another, or you can sort of take these different tools and you can use them to sort of push towards certain outcomes. That can be very satisfying, but more importantly, I think it also starts scratching those itches that people didn't even necessarily know they had, right? Cultist Simulator and Book of Hours do seem to have done quite well, and they're not necessarily ones that if you were to write down on paper what these games were, that this is like guaranteed to be successful. And again, I'm saying successful based off of the fact that, Weather Factory is a going concern and seems to be continuing along these lines as opposed to radically changing the types of games that they're making. So I'm going to guess that both games have, made their money back, and if not, are financing the next one. At the very least, are sort of giving, they're giving the they're giving enough to keep the studio going. And RimWorld, right? Millions of copies sold, and the game really has not gone on that deep of a discount. So that's millions of copies sold for a game that visually doesn't immediately grab you, and really is entirely about the that simulation. But again, if we only talk about the simulations, I kind of gave this example in the writers meetup. I don't want to give away the stories just to the programmers, right? So anyways, like the reason why I did that, so I brought up the Snare of the Tree and Other Perilous Seductions. So this was one of the ones that I brought in. This one, the subtitle for this one is Essays on the Dangers of Game Design. And then the other book is Against World Building and Other Provocations, Essays on History, Narrative, and Game Design. So the second one I mentioned is a collection of essays. The second one is a considerably shorter book, which is specifically on making games. And for those of you who are wondering, the game essay is ISBN 978-1916-902435. And the collection of essays is 978-1916-902411. I don't believe there are physical copies on the Etsy store anymore, but hopefully those of you who are interested can find yourself a copy. But yeah, so I kind of wanted to start off with a provocation at the start, because again, I imagine that probably a lot of the conversation might be, here's something I really liked about Final Fantasy, and that is like completely fine. I actually think it's like I don't want to deny people the ability to talk about that, because that's important too, right? You don't have to, I am not in a position to do write like me lessons. um, but I wanted to at least start with that provocation to just sort of say it's like, the most interesting and arguably the most profitable place for people like you and I to be working in are these unknown or these untested waters. I suppose once you have sort of a certain fundamental level of skill, like obviously if you're struggling to make the tools work, you're going to have a hard time no matter what. But one of the examples that I gave to really try and push the point is Ticket to Ride. So how many of you have played Ticket to Ride out of curiosity? This will be the last non-Book of Hours thing that I say, and then we're going to jump back into the game. Okay, so Algrens has played Ticket to Ride. How many of you don't want to put your hands up? Oh, interesting. We're going to have to play sometime, Vesper. Oh, hello. Is it Egwen Fay? Sorry, Egwenfar? My apologies for mispronouncing, but okay. So yeah, we've got a few people here who are at least familiar with Ticket to Ride. For those of you who are not familiar, it's a game. The base game takes place on a U.S. map. There's a bunch of cities, areas connecting it. You might guess from the title, it's a train game. Oh, thanks. Sounded like a threat. But yeah, it's a train game. Now, here's a question for you, because I've noticed that it's not that nobody knows this, but this is a bit of a rarer one. And for those of you who don't know, don't look it up, because I will tell you. I'm just curious about this. Does anybody here know that there's actually a story to Ticket to Ride? And if so, do you have a guess as to what that story is? There doesn't necessarily have to be a trick to it either. It does involve trains. You have no idea. Okay, interesting. You just read the instructions and cussed at friends a lot while playing. See, when I played it, people were relatively respectful and like did different paths. There was a competition going on, but there wasn't a whole lot of there weren't really cutthroat moves. Anyways, so you'd be completely justified in thinking that this is like Railroad Tycoon or like Railway Empire or God, I don't even remember it. Like there's so many Railroad Tycoon games out there, right? Microprose made them. There's Sid Meier games. There's tons of great railroad business sims to play. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read from the first page of the instruction manual for the original Ticket to Ride. On a blustery autumn evening, 5 old friends met in the back room of one of the city's oldest and most private clubs. Each had traveled a long distance from all corners of the world to meet on this very specific day, October 2nd, 1900, 28 years to the day that the London eccentric Phileas Fogg accepted and then won the £20,000 bet that he could travel around the world in 80 days. When the story of Fogg's triumphant journey filled all the newspapers of the day, the 5 attended university together. Inspired by his impetuous gamble and a few pints at the local pub, the group commemorated his circumnavigation with a more modest excursion and wager. A good bottle of good claret to the first to make it to Le Procope in Paris. Sorry, I'm terrible at pronunciation. Each succeeding year, they met to celebrate the anniversary and pay tribute to Fogg, and each year a new expedition, always more difficult, with a new wager, always more expensive, was proposed. Now, at the dawn of the century, it was time for a new impossible journey. The stakes: $1 million in a winner-takes-all competition. The objective: to see which of them could travel by rail to the most cities in North America in just 7 days. The journey would begin immediately. Ticket to Ride is a cross-country train adventure. Players compete to connect different cities by laying claim to railway routes on a map of North America. Now, this is neat. I mean, I like that there's a reference to the Jules Verne story, and it's a nice little setting, right? Like, sometimes it's just nice to play a game that is not about mowing down, lots and lots of enemies. But this makes absolutely no sense when you think of the game. Like, in the game, there will be times, a lot of times, where there's only one path between two cities. Or, there's two or three, and, it's rivalrous, right? You put your cards together, you make the connection. And the thing is like, the rivalry of that resource makes perfect sense if you are playing a railroad tycoon simulator, right? You buy up the land before the other people do, and there's only so much land to make that route economically viable. But like, what I'm getting now that I've read that story and looking at the map, when I like lay down my pieces between two routes, like, I'm kind of imagining my adventurer like putting a padlock on the door of the railway station. It's like, nobody's using this anymore. It just, like, the game does the fantasy that is presented in that opening page. And like, I don't mean to pick on Ticket to Ride. Like, it's a wonderful game in my opinion, but I know like some people are sort of like, yeah, it's not that good, but I think it's one of those very unobjectionable games that if people are used to playing sort of a handful of, older, like Monopoly, Clue, Battleship, you've kind of got the handful of ones that everyone knows. I sort of feel like Ticket to Ride's a nice little one that sort of bumps people out of that rut and shows them that there are maybe a few things that, few other things that they can try that they may enjoy. I know Settlers of Catan was like a huge one that brought everybody in. I have heard of Twilight Imperium. It seems like the sort of thing I would really enjoy, but I have never had the opportunity to play it. Every single time people talk about board games, though, they ask if I played Twilight Imperium, and I'm like, no, I really do want to try it. That one's by Fantasy Flight, right? Highly recommend trying it. Yeah, I should. And it's the other challenge too is that I probably have more board games than I should. A lot by GMT actually. But I actually don't have that many people to play. So I actually kind of like the GMT ones because they have solitaire options. I get to just look like this tragic figure in my half basement apartment saying, I don't need friends to play this. But yeah, it's definitely one that seems right up my alley, especially given the kinds of games that I like to play. Obviously not Book of Hours, but yeah, anyway, so the reason why I went through this is like I made the really aggressive argument here, which is to say that people have been able to enjoy Ticket to Ride clearly without thinking about the miniature version of Around the World in 80 Days or Across the US in seven days. Most people, if they think about a story at all, are telling themselves a story about building railroads and, profiting from that, basically. And it's fine, right? Like, people do not enjoy the game less knowing the story, and people do not enjoy the game less not knowing the story. So clearly stories don't matter in games. But no, I tried to use that as an example, saying is like, there's the fantasy, and sometimes that fantasy is something that the player controls, and that's fine. And then I sort of use the contrast to sort of say, it's like, you have RimWorld where there's kind of a setting that's provided, although I don't think a lot of people do read that opening fiction at the start, and it does remind me a little bit of Traveller, to be honest. And then, and then on the other side, you have something which I think, like Book of Hours and Cultist Simulator, which I think has a pretty good claim to saying that the story really matters, and there is a very clear stamp of authorship. There is something specific that you are being driven to feel and experience, but that it's not being conveyed in the usual way, right? You're not sort of being sat down and given a cutscene, or you're not being given sort of a small novel to read. It's a little bit more tightly integrated into that experience of going through it. So that's why I had cause for the books. I hope it went well. Like I probably spent about 15 or 20 minutes talking about that, and then kind of opened up the discussion, because the thing is, there've been a couple of times when there've been like it's supposed to be a discussion group, but like it winds up being a 1 hour lecture from one person, and like I can deliver that, maybe not on gaming in a good way, but like obviously you're there and it's to hopefully bring other people in. It was funny because there were a couple of non-gamers, but they said it's like that they really liked playing one of the Jurassic Park games with their kids. So I'm assuming this is like one of the Super Nintendo ones or something like that. And what I thought was funny is that if you compare that to what Jurassic Park is now, Jurassic Park games are tycoon games. So we now think the hero is John Hammond, right? Before it was like Dr. Grant or, Dr. Malcolm saving, people from the dinos, shooting them down or escaping from them. Whereas now, where the capitalists trying to make money off of the dinos and, just making sure we have a good insurance policy if something happens to the guests. It's a very interesting shift. Okay, for those of you who have been looking for Book of Hours, sorry for the digression. Thank you all for the conversation, though, and I do. It's always nice to get a little reminder for Twilight Imperium. I mean, maybe I should just get it and like have it, and then if the opportunity comes up, then I just have it to play, as opposed to hoping that I'm gonna like find 4 other people who have access to Twilight Imperium and want to play. I've been planning to visit next autumn to see Zuthi one more time, and now I'll never have the chance. However long one lives, one does not grow entirely accustomed to the suddenness of death. Yeah, well, I think actually one analogy I like to think of is diplomacy, because I feel like diplomacy is a very, very well-regarded game among sort of like game nerds, but it also seems like a rather time-consuming one that really does actually require everybody to be engaged for the whole experience. So I think there's a couple of things. It's really interesting to see how games have sort of shifted over time, particularly in response to board games have shifted in response to video games, because you have like GMT with their Project 500, and this was Kickstarter before Kickstarter, right? They would essentially get originally 500, now it's higher because obviously it's a bigger company, a bigger, just everything's bigger at this point. But for them, they originally were looking for basically 500 sort of commitments to see whether or not it was worth making the game. And once they had that 500, then they would do sort of a run. And if you think of it right, it's a nice way of mitigating one of the big risks that a lot of the really classic board game companies, I'm thinking of like the war game legends like Avalon Hill and things like that. One of the problems that they ran into is that, they could be on top of the world, but if they have a bad game, like one that people don't want to play, you have all that cost into producing these physical products that nobody wants, right? You have all this cardboard and plastic, which isn't even valuable as cardboard because you've now drawn like maps and stuff like that on it. So something like Project 500 is at least doing, a little bit better market research. It's doing a little bit more in terms of reducing some of the risk of putting a game out there. The difficulty of finding people to play with. This has given rise to some solitaire systems. So I was really interested in Volko Ruhnke's Labyrinth, the War on Terror. And one thing that was quite attractive for that to me was that I wasn't 100% sure if I would find somebody who was going to play Labyrinth with me. But knowing that that game had a solitaire option made it appealing enough to say, I'll take a bit of a flyer on this because, I mean, now there's a digital copy that you can play, so that's not a huge deal. But yeah, the idea here is that this was sufficient for me to say, okay, I don't need to worry about finding an equally nerdy individual who's willing to, like if you're playing Labyrinth: The War on Terror, one person's going to have to play Al-Qaeda basically, and that's, that's not a good feeling. So in the context of a game, like whatever, I'll be Darth Vader if I have to, but yeah, like obviously there's gonna be some friction in terms of making that work, even if you find somebody who's willing to play a more complicated game. So solitaire systems are a thing. Also simplicity of rules, right? So you're never going to beat a computer in terms of complexity, but to create these very elegant rule systems that still allow for a lot of depth of gameplay while not necessarily burdening somebody with a small manual to go through. I mean, I think this is one reason why something like Twilight Struggle was so successful. You have, two players. You have basically a very complicated subject, the Cold War, which, in one sense you could say involves more than two participants. There's two superpowers, but there is the, all of the nations that were being sort of influenced over that time. There's an easy way to see that this can be split up among many other nations. Similar to the follow-up, right? Imperial Struggle, right? The world wasn't just England and France, but they found a way of sort of encapsulating this period of time and this competition between these two large powers in a way that still sort of felt credible to that time period. But the last big one, and I usually use GMT as sort of an example, just because it does seem to they're usually pretty upfront in terms of what they're pursuing, but they have a series now of lunchtime games, right? Games that can be played in a lunchtime, and why? Well, because chances are the people who are playing those kinds of games are probably more like old school grognard kind who did play the old Avalon Hill games, right? I've heard of the Avalon Hill games. I don't think Avalon Hill has ever been a company that's existed while I've been alive. I mean, I don't know when they shut down, but like I'd be willing to guess that it's not even close how much I missed a company like that. I mean, I'm sure there's probably the brand still exists and is a subsidiary of some firm now. But the big thing on it is that, people grow up, they have kids, they have jobs, they don't necessarily have as much time. And if they do have time, the other players don't. And maybe you don't want to play solitaire the whole time. So the idea of a lunchtime game, something that you can play in a small afternoon, is also appealing. I guess this is kind of why Magic is still an ongoing thing, right? Because you can play Magic during a lunch break. You can be in a days-long tournament, but if you just need to play something at a convention, or if you just want to do if you just want to do something small, it's not as big of a time commitment as breaking out a full-on war game and trying to get through that in anything other than like a weekend. So it's the econ background, right? It's neat to see these developers adapt to a changing set of priorities and circumstances, not always driven within gaming, but driven by substitutes for gaming, right? Netflix, video games, what have you. And I think it's kind of just interesting to see how it's survived and arguably thrived in a period when it's easier than ever to both buy and play and make video games. All right, I've already missed his funeral, but I've commissioned a memorial composition for him. I am hoping that it can be played on this device of his, but there are ramifications to invoking the powers of the lower skies that I must understand first. So this is just a 4 sky. We can see if there's yeah, there we go, 7 Faces of Icarus, or possibly Humors of a Gentleman. Let's do Humors of a Gentleman, feels a little nicer. Oh, Zuthi. He was a much greater craftsman than I had realized, and I think it might have been the death of him. Perhaps this unfinished lark should remain unfinished. Thank you, librarian. Okay, let's get the invitations out. My commitment to you is we will do the Salon before I finish tonight, so even if that means I have to go a bit later. Patience, thus the mountain awaits the fall of the snow, thus Monday awaits the death of the weekend, thus the postmistress waits for me to purchase the necessary stamp. Who threw this overboard? And one more. All right, so we have all the guests on their way. There's not a whole lot I want to try. I'll see maybe what happens if I try to fill up some of the roles on the Lighthouse Institute. I don't believe we have everyone that we can bring. Well, actually, maybe we do. So Fraser Strathcoyne is the treasurer. Schaller could be the solvent, secretary solvent. Arthur Moore could be the secretary vigilant. I don't think we have a secretary enigmatic. Or no. Yeah, no, we don't have a secretary enigmatic yet. Did Arthur Moore receive my invitation? I think we'll wait for the evening on this one. I'll keep recycling the whist. I'm curious what happens if we start crossing into Brandkrug Village in terms of items. Alright, so here are the guests. So if I just add Arthur Moore, okay, so that's not sufficient to add it. I'd have to have one for every role, and D.I. Douglas Moore does not count. Okay, yeah. So basically, it's for want of a secretary enigmatic that I can't try to found the institute, unless it's because I'm lacking the journal. Yeah, no, it looks like I have to fill all of the slots. And also, I don't necessarily want to have Fraser Strathcoyne as it would be kind of interesting. Like, he's got Sympathy Carapace. This one understands the possibilities of the Carapace Cross Alliance awakening. Schaller, on the other hand, has Fear Carapace. This one knows that the Carapace might consume humanity or alter it beyond recognition. And Agenda Stone Consumed. This one would burn or shatter what remains of the gods from stone to fuel their own purposes. Lieutenant Author Thomas Moore. Fear Devourers. This one knows the perils of the hidden world. Alukites, Mansa Spirits, Hungry Ghosts. And Madame Olympie Bichet. Agenda Peace. This one believes that struggle and war may yet be the cause of the world's immolation. And Fear Carapace, this one knows that the Carapace might consume humanity or alter it beyond recognition. So everyone's not necessarily pulling in the same direction here. I was hoping to try and somehow get Connie in here with the Agenda Revelation. This one wishes to share knowledge despite Calyptra, but there's no role for her yet. So I'm going to wait until after midday, and then we will... I think I'll actually just go for the proper evening at this point. We kind of already said that we would write off the first day. And once we're ready for supper, Actually, I think we're... Little hour called nons, when the doors of the mansis are most tightly closed. For the secular, the hours when we may anticipate tea or celebrate it. So is this the time that I want? I think so. A salon in the refectory, the room where the curia met, a fitting venue for a salon. Late lunch? Let's go for something in the evening. Sometimes it's nice to just listen to the sounds. An afternoon spent profitably, reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers through the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. It is winter, and the storms have tightened the seas. I am sitting before the fire in the sweet bones with a beef and potato pasty in one hand and a hot ale posset in the other. I think what I may do is, when the time comes, I will definitely use the fishermen to open up the sagging dock and the perilous path. The other thing that I might try... Actually, no, I think I might just stick to the... I think I might just stick to those 2 rooms to start, and then, obviously, the lessons. But... All right. Supper. All right, so, what are we doing? Our guests will be enjoying honey scar jasmine tea, a cup, soothing to the senses. Roast beef. Our fathers of old were robust, stout, and strong, and kept open house with good cheer all day long, which made their plump tenants rejoice in this song. Oh, the roast beef of old England, and old English roast beef. Roast potatoes. You really need rosemary for roast potatoes, but fortunately the kitchen garden at Hush House has never been short of rosemary. Cater and Hero Second Flush Assam. Tea from the land of the real unicorn, imported by Cater and Hero. A witching tisane, to mend a broken heart, to color a pale soul. Vegetable stew, unexciting, but also unobjectionable. Strathcoyne whiskey, the collector has collected a distillery, it seems. Orange jumble, they should be the size of teacup rims, and should curl their crisp edges, faintly pink as the underneath of a young mushroom. Lady Jekyll kitchen essays, and a stuffed golden marrow. This marrow was accounted a beauty among its kind. Now it's a dish for those who understand fidelity. And the guests: Lieutenant Arthur Thomas Moore, retired. Hero, pilgrim, traitor. He'll always be a soldier, but never again can he be only a soldier. D.I. Douglas Moore, Detective Illuminate of the Suppression Bureau, a stoic but weary fellow. His dearest wish is to move to Chingford and grow roses, but the buggers won't let him retire. Father Stanislav John Schaller, priest, diplomat, gardener, a soft-voiced man with a very steady gaze. Mr. Fraser Strathcoyne, philanthropist, collector, former librarian, a complicated man, but not a cruel one. Madame Olympie Bichet, essayist, illustrator, critic, editor of the Carisham Review. My guests take their... Welcome, Secretary Persistent. My guests take their places for supper. Keep an eye on the salon as it progresses. You'll need to add soul cards to encourage the conversation to flow. Different guests will need different soul cards. The more guests, the longer the salon will last. Lunch and supper last longer than less formal salons, allowing an extra interaction between your guests. Wistful asides, instinct and emotion. Add a tryst card. Better now. We have enough whist that I can afford to use it without needing to worry about everything getting taken up during the salon. Olympe and Fraser discuss Azamil and Ashertine. Olympe confesses in a rush that she can never remember which is which. After an agonizing moment, Fraser shakes his head and admits, "No more can I." They grin at each other. Thinks of revelation. Raise a complex question. Add a whist card. Reason discussion. Fraser and Stanislav discuss the unnumbered stones of Brittany, not far from Stanislav's current digs. Fraser insists that they were placed by the Carapace cross. Stanislav humors him. Right, I just want to make sure that I put the many-faceted lesson before I lose it. Exalted debates, a more sober tone. Add a Faust card. Olympe is probing Douglas about the suppression of Vero's work, Opening the Sky. We've actually had a couple of these before. Opening the Sky, about how odd it is that the government would commission the work for the new king's coronation and then suppress it. Douglas puffs uncomfortably on his pipe and says things like, "police business," and "don't know much about music," until Olympe mentions the word gleam, at which point he abruptly excuses himself and goes out to take the air. Instinct and emotion. Add a tryst card. Apparently I'm hosting a salon, still running out to the Sweet Bones for a snack. Stanislav and Arthur argue happily about which herbal tisane tastes the most disgusting, and hence is the most useful to speed lingering guests on their way. Ask about dreams. Add a Fete card. Arthur and Olympe debate the hypothetical city unbuilt, the dwelling place of perfect balance. Olympe suggests it might be achievable in the moon marches, or even in the House of the Moon. Arthur believes it's better as an unachievable ideal, especially since the Menascate, the Hour of Perfect Balance, is one of the trio of chancel hours, and the other two might prefer to limit her power by forbidding the city. I'm just going to make a quick note of that, because I feel like we'd written this down before at some point, but I don't recall. Oh, we have another. A more somber tone. Add a Faust card. Olympi asks Stanislav about the Pontine yew of legend, and then about the honey of its flowers, which opens a door to another place. He has tasted the honey, but he will say of that place only that it is not the Mansis. Definitely a busy time. My guests leave happy. You've gained an additional potent memory. All right, so Faust, Fat, Trist, Faust, Whist, Trist. And my guests. A lively Salon. Memory satisfaction. Curious hunch. Okay, and the lessons. So Writes the Roots, we'll definitely have a use for that one. Meniscate Reflections, I'm pretty sure we can find a use for. Herbs and Infusions, anything with nectar is pretty much automatically going to be helpful. I'm definitely sure we'll make use of Oronoscopy. Now, Stone Stories I actually think is one that I just want to level up anyway. And I think we said we can make something out of Inks of Revelation. Now, I know I'm a few minutes early for the stream, but one, I have some sushi waiting for me to finish eating. Two, I did get a late start, and I actually recorded tomorrow's Cultist Simulator, Book of Hours episode for YouTube this morning. So I got an early start to this morning, and I'm kind of feeling the effects. So if you don't mind, I'm going to just take a few minutes early and get to bed. Snack and then go to bed. But I will be back on Friday. I will try to start as close to the normal start time. Sorry, I shouldn't even say normal start time. The start time I want to start, which would be between 7 or 8. I will try to shoot for that as close as I can, but I also know that I've got a few. So I've hit a nice milestone in terms of some of the work that I was doing at work. Some of the big projects are at a point now where, I'm going to be doing more big projects, but like the ones that I'd been shooting towards are either delivered or they're at a point where they're out of my hands. So I'm going to enjoy a brief reprieve, I think, but I do want to make sure that I'm just kind of making the most of each day and, enjoying this time while not getting too far behind on other things. So, and some of that means getting a proper sleep. So thank you everybody for watching. I will be back with the same playthrough, like I said, on Friday. And I'm expecting here that there won't be any more missed streams until the new year. Traditionally, what I've done is I have streamed on Christmas. As always, it is never an expectation that anybody shows up to the stream whenever I go online. But in particular for the Christmas streams, those are usually because I know a few viewers. So actually, the real origins of this come from very, very dear friends of mine who actually I miss tremendously because I did move across the country to do this work. But they kind of knew I was on my own in Vancouver, and they're already very good friends of mine. But they basically made sure that every single Christmas I was at their place with their parents, and it was wonderful. I always loved spending time with them. I definitely felt appreciated. I had wonderful conversation. Just the types of friends who you really want to put the time into spending time with. They're just great people. And I think for me, because I really enjoyed that and I value those friends quite a bit, one of these small things that I felt that I can do, knowing that I think somebody had just kind of given an offhand comment around the season that they were not feeling great. They didn't really have much to do. I think maybe they'd just lost a parent recently or something like that. I kind of reflected on that and I thought, okay, I'm never going to be a substitute for, just meeting up with friends. But I do know that having a place to hang out is sometimes nice. And so I made sure, so some of the recent things that we've done, basically I want to try where I can on the Christmas, because I'm not necessarily going to be out and have any obligations for myself. I figure it'd be nice to spend some time to do some streaming stuff. And one of the things that I've been doing lately is to read some kind of a Christmas story on stream, because people also seem to like hearing some people do like listening to stories being read. So one year we did A Christmas Carol. I think last year we did The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle, I like to call it the Sherlock Holmes Christmas special. And whether or not I read a story this year, I'm not sure. I'd like to, but it's, I got to find the right one. But overall, it's the sort of thing that where I can, I like to do. And so Christmas is actually that one time where I will actually take the holiday and I will make sure that I do a stream for it. So I expect that probably the next stream that I'll be taking off will be New Year's. But other than that, I look forward to sharing some more Book of Hours with all of you. And yeah, I don't know. Oh, that's nice. Lovely to hear, Algrins. I'm glad. Like, obviously, the point of that stuff is not to hear... like, the real goal of those is to never hear directly from someone, this meant the most to me. Of all the years, this was the time that I really needed to hear it. It's wonderful to know that, right? It's like running into people who watch the YouTube channel and say, hey, I like your YouTube stuff and found you through this. That's a nice feeling, right? It's nice to know that people are watching and people are enjoying. But it's really just kind of, if possible, like, definitely it's nice to know that someone got something out of it. You don't necessarily know who it is. You may never know who it is. But to have, just have a chance to do a little something for Christmas that works for someone. It's nice. All right, let's see what our options are online. So alas, no Weather Factory games being streamed except for me. I am going to host... I know we hosted Revive Snow recently, and I'm somewhat tempted to do that, but I think I'm going to host Will Shand, because I don't always get a chance to see him. But he also he does sort of strange and off-the-beaten-track games, usually horror games, but not always. This one actually has a name, as in, like, it appears on Twitch. This is called Planet Scanner. But anyways, Will... at least when I knew him, was actually doing this for a living. He's got a very unique stream, and like I said, I don't always host him. For those of you also looking for some other streams that you might want to check out, someone who's online right now is Revived Snow. And then for those of you that like Book of Hours and related games, we actually have Vesper Fortune in the chat, who I should mention hasn't done Book of Hours on... Sorry, I'm not going to say the name, but I see a couple of names in chat who might be connected to Kite 260. And I see you, and I'm very happy to see you. I hope you're doing well. If you have school, I hope you have a good day at school. But I'm running out of time. So anyways, please check out those streamers. Enjoy Will Shan's stream, and I will see you all on Friday. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks.